Wie werden unsere Fertilizer und Food Prices denn weggekockt?
Fertilizer prices have hit record highs, driven by supply shortages caused by the Ukraine-Russia war, along with a host of pre-existing factors.
It's a challenge for all of U.S. agriculture right now. For farmers who are just walking in to buy fertilizer today, they're twice as expensive as they would have been last August,
Einfach
up to three
Preisverdopplung.
times as costly as they would have been in early 2021.
Oder dreifach.
Fertilizer is typically among farmers' biggest expenses each year, and the rising costs are creating cascading impacts for farmer incomes, crop yields, and
Das ist natürlich schlau, genau, ja, am Produktionsbereich der Herstellung von fast allen Lebensmitteln einfach ab da einfach das ganze Geld abzuzwacken, indem du einfach Fertilizer tierisch teuer machst. Wenn man es ein bisschen später macht.
food prices.
Broadly speaking, that is a big concern for food production. And if other parts of the world can't get their fertilizer in, then it becomes what some CEOs have warned as a global food crisis.
So what's driving these surging fertilizer prices? And what does that mean for farmers and your grocery bills? Like many products and services during the pandemic, fertilizer prices have been impacted by global supply chain challenges.
There's a lot of elements that go into manufacturing fertilizer and how it's produced. It requires different ingredients and natural gas from all different parts of the world. If one of those things is disrupted,
Echt? Erdgas?
it throws off the
Zum,
entire
zum
supply
wegen
chain for how
Kau
fertilizer is
also
produced.
There
wegen
are
Temperatur
several key
erhöhen.
factors behind the
Oder
global
was?
fertilizer supply crunch driving high prices. First, various trade restrictions in 2021 led to a steep drop-off in fertilizer exports. In December, the US and European Union imposed sanctions on Belarus. This halted exports of potash, a key ingredient in mineral fertilizers. Belarus is the world's third largest potash provider. Meanwhile, trade restrictions from China, Turkey, Egypt, and Russia led to reduced fertilizer exports in the second half of 2021.
China banned phosphate exports in 2021 when a country like China cuts off its exports. That sends prices all over the world up.
In February, economic fallout from Russia's invasion of Ukraine further compounded the strain on fertilizer production. Russia is the world's largest fertilizer exporter, providing around 15% of the world's nitrogen-based fertilizers and 17% of the global potash supply. The West's financial sanctions against Moscow, combined with transportation challenges linked to the war, led to a sharp decline in Russian exports.
If you are going to export out of Russia, the insurance on vessels is very expensive. That keeps people from getting fertilizers out.
At the same time, rising natural gas prices have prompted some European factories to scale back fertilizer production. Natural gas is another major Russian export and a key
Ja, schön
ingredient
abhängig
in
machen von
making
despotischen
nitrogen-based
Wichslöchern.
fertilizer. Fertilizer is about 3 to 4 times costlier now than in 2020, and
Krass.
farmers around the world are feeling the pinch.
High fertilizer prices has affected really the flow of how our operation does business.
Du erst mit
And really it comes
subventionieren.
down to timing and how much risk does the retailer take? How much risk does the farmer take?
Grant Wells is a third-generation
Und neue
corn
Sachen
and
werden auch
soybean
geil.
farmer in Fonda, Iowa. He's also the CEO and owner of Wells Ag Supply, an agriculture retail business.
When the Russian war hit in February is really when things started going wild, is when things started
Sieht auch ein
doubling,
bisschen fertig
tripling.
aus.
And
Der
so it's
junge
really
Mann.
going to affect what the decision making and what farmers' profitability is going to be in 2023.
Higher fertilizer prices translate into higher production costs for farmers, who already operate on tight profit margins. It's also leading to delays in farmers' planting schedules, which could create supply chain snags as crops are harvested later in the season.
Most farmers I see delaying that decision-making process to later in the season. You know, instead of maybe November, December, they're probably going to sit on their hands and wait till Jan, Feb, March, hoping for some sort of a price reduction. And if that doesn't happen, then they'll choose to decide, how much can get cut back.
Applying less fertilizer could also lead to lower crop yields. While some U.S. farmers plan to cut back on their overall fertilizer use, others are shifting their acres toward less fertilizer-intensive crops. Soybeans, for instance, don't require as much nitrogen-based fertilizer.
So it's usually a battle in Iowa or in the Midwest between corn and soybeans. And so farmers will look at alternatives to corn. Corn is a lot more dominating on the fertility needs.
According to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the net income for farmers reached around $119 billion in fiscal year 2021, the highest in 8 years. But higher fertilizer prices and other rising costs, such as herbicides, are squeezing their profit margins. That means grocery bills could go up even more in 2022, following a year in which global food prices rose to decade highs.
It appears that food costs are high and farmers are benefiting, but that is not the case. Profit margins are the same. Consumers are just unfortunately having to pay more to put food on their own table.
Dass die
Higher
Farmer
corn
irgendwann
and
keinen Bock
soybean
mehr haben.
prices, for example, raise the cost of animal feed for meat companies, which pass along the increase to consumers.
And I think the worst case scenario is that we don't have fertilizer at all to apply to the crops. And then that becomes a feed and food production issue. If we don't produce the crops, we can't probably produce the livestock and the poultry, and we get into actual food challenges in the U.S. And that would be a much, much greater concern than what we have today.
Meanwhile, some U.S. farmers are looking at commercial fertilizer alternatives. Biologicals, for instance, are natural fertilizers containing microorganisms that enhance soil fertility.
The high prices are forcing us to look at alternative ways to how we've applied fertilizer, to be more precise, and to look at alternatives like what a biological could do.
But switching to biologicals or trying new techniques may carry risks for farmers who rely on consistent crop yields to make a profit.
If they try something different one year and their yields are down, crop doesn't come in like they want, then that's it for the year. That is their income. They need it to work. They can't really take the risk.
Subventionieren.
As fertilizer prices continue to rise, the agriculture industry braces for the long-term impacts on food production.
The solutions are very difficult to this because it comes down to oil production, natural gas supplies. I think there's a very good chance that fertilizer costs could continue to increase, and we could go into the 2023 crop year with even higher fertilizer costs than what we've had in 2022.